It's been 6 months since Sarah passed away. 6 months, or 183 days to be exact. The time that was supposed to heal has only dulled the sharpest edge of the pain, leaving behind a dull, aching void that has become my constant companion. The house, once filled with her laughter, is now silent. The silence is deafening. Today, I finally found the strength to go through her closet, her sanctuary. I'd put this moment off for as long as I could, because it felt so final. As if by clearing out her things, I was erasing the last physical traces of her presence. Every item held a memory. The blue dress she wore to my brother's wedding. Her favorite cashmere sweater she'd curl up in on cold evenings, sitting beside me on the sofa. The air in the closet still held the faintest scent of her perfume, lavender and vanilla. I closed my eyes, breathing it in, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like she was standing right beside me. I methodically worked my way through the hangers, packing clothes into boxes for charity. The work was mechanical, and it helped to keep my mind blank. But on the top shelf, tucked behind a stack of old sweaters she hadn't worn in years, I found a small wooden box. It was a simple sandalwood box I'd given her for our 5th anniversary. She kept little trinkets inside, movie stubs from our first dates, a pressed flower, postcards. But inside, underneath the velvet lining, was an envelope, plain white, thick to the touch. My name, to Alex, was written on it in neat script, but the handwriting, it wasn't hers. Sarah's handwriting was a sprawling, right-leaning cursive, full of life, just like her. These letters were straight, almost calligraphic, written with a steady, masculine hand. I turned the envelope over in my hands. There was no stamp, no return address. It was sealed. My heart began to pound in my chest, so hard I thought the sound must be echoing in the quiet room. Who could have left a letter for me in her private box? And why had she never given it to me? I didn't know then, as I opened that envelope, that its contents wouldn't just surprise me. They would shatter the world I had built over 20 years into a million pieces. It would make me question every memory, every word she ever said, every look she ever gave me. I didn't know that this letter would change everything I believed about our life. About our love, about her. We all have our secrets, don't we? Our own locked boxes. Before I tell you what was in that letter, I want to ask you a small favor. If this story has already drawn you in, if you're curious about the kinds of secrets that can hide behind a happy life, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share these difficult but important stories. Now, let's get back to that envelope in my trembling hands. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed, where she had taken her last breath. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely pull out the single sheet of paper folded into quarters. The paper was high quality, heavy stock. I unfolded it. The text was typed, but at the bottom was a signature written in the same steady hand as the name on the envelope. Mark. Mark. I rolled the name around in my head. We didn't have any friends or family named Mark. At least, not one who would write a personal letter to me and hide it among my wife's belongings. I began to read, slowly, absorbing each word as if trying to delay the inevitable. Alex, if you are reading this, it means Sarah is gone. Please accept my deepest condolences. I cannot imagine your pain, but know that in this moment, a part of my world has collapsed as well. My name is Mark. Sarah and I knew each other a very long time ago, before she met you. Our past is complicated, and she made the decision to leave it behind when she started a new life with you. I have always respected her choice. I am not writing to you to cause pain or to disturb her memory. I am writing because she and I had an agreement. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, I had to make sure you knew the truth. She was afraid to tell you herself. Afraid of losing you, afraid of destroying the beautiful thing you two had built. Alex, Sarah had a son. I stopped. I reread the last sentence, over and over. Sarah had a son. The words didn't form a coherent thought. It was some kind of absurd, cruel joke. A mistake. Maybe this letter wasn't for me, but for some other Alex. But my name was on the envelope. And the box belonged to my wife. I forced myself to read on. His name is Leo, our son. He was born 23 years ago, long before you met. We were young, scared, and not ready to be parents. Sarah's family insisted that we give him up for adoption. It was the hardest decision of her life, and it haunted her always. She gave him up so he could have a chance at a better life, at a full family that we couldn't give him. She never stopped loving him. Every year, on his birthday, May 15th, she relived that day. She never tried to find him, afraid of disrupting his life and breaking her promise. But she always hoped he was happy. I am writing this to fulfill her wish. She wanted you to know that her silence was not born from a lack of trust, but from a boundless love for you and a fear of ruining everything. She considered your life together sacred and didn't want to tarnish it with the shadows of her past. I am not asking you for anything. I am simply keeping a promise to a woman I once loved too. Now you know. What you do with this truth is up to you. Sincerely, Mark. I finished the letter, and the room swam before my eyes. I couldn't breathe. A son, Leo, 23 years old. May 15th. A lie. It was all a lie. We were married for 20 years. 20 years we had shared a bed, dreams, fears. We went through the death of her parents together. We celebrated my promotions at work together. We cried together when the doctor told us we would never have children of our own. I remember that day. Sarah held my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. There were tears in her eyes, but she smiled at me and said, "It's okay, my love. We have each other. That's enough." I believed her. I thought we were both grieving a future we couldn't have. And now I realized she might have been grieving a past she'd already had. My mind raced, sifting through 2 decades of memories, searching for what? Clues? Hints? And they began to surface. Asterisk May 15th. Every year on that day, Sarah would become quiet and withdrawn. She'd take the day off work, saying she just needed to be alone. I always thought it was spring melancholy or just fatigue. I'd buy her flowers, try to cheer her up, but she would only offer a sad smile and go for a long walk in the park. Alone. I never pushed. I respected her need for space. God, I was so blind. Once, about 10 years ago, we were walking in that park and saw a family with a little boy, maybe 5 or 6. He fell and scraped his knee. Sarah, without a second thought, ran to him, pulled a bandage from her purse, and whispered something gentle in his ear. The boy instantly stopped crying and smiled at her. I remember thinking then what a wonderful mother she would have been. She watched them walk away with such a look of longing in her eyes it made my own heart ache. When I asked if she was all right, she started and said, "Yes, just lost in thought," and her box. I remembered finding it. Open once, Sarah was sitting on the bed, sifting through its contents with tears on her cheeks. When she saw me, she quickly shut the lid and smiled sheepishly, blaming it on sentimentality. Each of these moments was a tiny red flag, a signal I had completely missed. I only saw what I wanted to see, the perfect wife, the perfect marriage. But the reality was different. In our perfect life, there had always been a third person, the ghost of a child I never knew existed. I looked at the letter again. Our son. Those 2 words, written by another man, cut me deeper than anything else. Our entire shared history, so clear and simple to me just an hour ago, was now a complex, tangled knot of lies and secrets. The shock gave way to a frantic, desperate need for proof. My mind refused to accept the letter at face value. It had to be a mistake, a malicious prank. I had to find something to disprove it, or to confirm it. I started with the photo albums. We kept them in the living room on the bottom shelf of Vitala bookcase. Dozens of them, a chronicle of our life together. Here we were on our honeymoon in Italy, young and blinded by love. Here was our first apartment, the renovations we did with our own hands. Here were our vacations, birthdays, holidays with friends. In every picture, Sarah was smiling. I stared into her face, searching for a shadow of a secret, but I saw only happiness. Or what I had mistaken for happiness. I moved on to her personal things. The boxes with her college journals she never let me read. I had always respected her privacy. But now all bets were off. I tore open a box. The entry stopped abruptly a year before we met. The last few pages had been torn out. Neatly, right along the crease. Panic was rising. I felt like a madman turning my own home upside down in search of a ghost. The drawers of her dresser, the boxes in the attic, the old suitcases, I checked everything. I was looking for something that didn't fit into our shared story, and I found it. Tucked inside her favorite copy of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, which always sat on her nightstand, wasn't a bookmark, but a small faded photograph. A Polaroid. It showed a tiny infant wrapped in a hospital blanket. He was asleep, his face wrinkled and serene. On the back, in faded ink, written in her handwriting, were the words, "Leo, my little star. May 15th, 1998. I will always love you." The year 1998. Sarah and I met in late 1999. I sank to the floor, my back against the bed. I held the irrefutable proof in my hands. The photo and the letter. The ghost had a face. My wife, the woman I had lived with for 20 years, had a son with another man. And she hadn't just hidden a youthful mistake from me. She had hidden an entire piece of her soul. I couldn't get enough air. I felt the walls of the room closing in. I had to talk to someone. Someone who knew her back then. There was only one person left. Her younger sister, Emily. I found my phone. My fingers fumbled. I misdialed twice. Finally, I heard the ringing, and then Emily's sleepy voice on the other end. "Alex, is something wrong? It's almost midnight." "Emily," my voice was hoarse, alien. "I need to talk to you. About Sarah." There was a pause on the line. Then she said, her voice now laced with alarm, "What happened?" I found something, a letter and a photo." I paused, gathering my strength. "Emily, who is Leo?" A sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a long, heavy silence. I could hear her ragged breathing. That silence was the answer. She knew. She had known all this time, and she had said nothing. "Alex, where are you?" she finally asked, her voice quiet and broken. "I'm at home. I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, she was there. Her eyes were red, her face etched with guilt. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah and I had shared 1,000 morning coffees. "She made me swear," Emily began, refusing to meet my eyes. "She said it was her secret, her cross to bear, and that she had no right to put it on you. And then she told me everything. The story of a first love, of a 17-year-old Sarah and a 19-year-old Mark. He was an artist, a dreamer. They were madly in love. When Sarah found out she was pregnant, their world fell apart. Her parents, strict and conservative, were horrified. They saw it as a disgrace to the family. They forbade her from seeing Mark and sent her to live with an aunt in another city to hide the pregnancy. She wanted to keep the baby, Alex, Emily sobbed. She begged them. But they told her she would ruin her life and the child's life. They convinced her that adoption was the only humane choice. Mark was crushed too, but what could he do? He was a broke student. They were just kids. Sarah gave birth to a son. She was allowed to hold him for only a few minutes before he was taken away. She named him Leo because there was one bright star in the sky that night, and she decided it was his star. Then her parents did everything they could to erase the episode from her life. They moved, changed their numbers. Sarah never saw Mark again. A year later, she met me. "She loved you so much," Emily whispered. "You were her salvation, her safe harbor. She said that with you, she could finally breathe again. But that day, it lived inside of her. She was terrified that if you found out, you wouldn't see the woman you fell in love with, but damaged goods, a liar. She thought the truth would kill your love for her, and she couldn't have survived that." I listened to her, and the world around me crumbled to dust. Every word from Emily was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation of my life. The woman I had worshipped had lived her life in fear and lies. And I, her husband, the person closest to her in the world, had been too blind to see a thing. When Emily left, leaving me alone with the ruins of my past, the rain began. A soft patter on the roof at first, then it grew into a furious downpour, as if the heavens themselves were mourning my shattered illusion. I sat in the dark, watching the streams of water run down the window pane. Every clap of thunder resonated in my chest. The first emotion was rage, a burning, all-consuming rage. How could she? How could she keep this secret for 20 years? Our marriage, our vows, our in sickness and in health, it was all built on a foundation of lies. She had looked me in the eye and lied. Every single day. I stood up and paced the living room. My eyes fell on our wedding photo on the mantelpiece. We were holding each other, beaming with happiness. I walked over and picked up the frame. I looked into her eyes in the picture. Who are you? Who are you really, Sarah? The woman who swore her eternal love to me, or the woman who kept a letter from another man about your son in her closet? I raised my arm to hurl the photo against the wall, to smash it into 1,000 pieces, just as she had smashed my life. But my hand froze in midair. I couldn't do it, because beneath the rage, like a second skin, was an unbearable pain, the pain of betrayal. The feeling that a part of my soul had been ripped out. Every happy memory was now poisoned. Our first kiss, was she thinking of Mark? Our wedding day, was she grieving the son she would never see? The nights we made love, was I just a replacement, a convenient escape from her past? These questions were a form of torture. They swirled in my head like vultures, tearing my love for her to shreds, and then came the grief. But it wasn't the clean, understandable grief I had felt for the last 6 months. This was a new, ugly form of grief. I wasn't just mourning her death. I was mourning our marriage, which, it turned out, had never existed in the way I'd imagined it. I was mourning my own naivety, my blind faith. I was mourning the man I had been only yesterday, a happy husband who thought he knew everything about his wife. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself a whiskey, glass after glass. I wanted to numb the pain, to turn off the thoughts, but the alcohol only sharpened them. The memories flooded back with a new, cruel clarity. I remembered how we'd once discussed adoption after we learned we were infertile. I suggested it. I was ready, but Sarah refused point blank. "I can't, Alex," she'd said then, with such panic in her voice that I never brought it up again. I couldn't love a stranger's child as my own. What a cruel irony. She couldn't love a stranger's child because she already had one of her own out there somewhere. Her refusal wasn't born from a lack of love, but from an overabundance of it, all directed at the one she had lost. I sat like that for hours. Rage gave way to pain, pain to grief, and grief to utter desolation. I cried. Not like I had at her funeral, surrounded by sympathetic faces. I sobbed in the silence of the empty house, alone with my broken life. They were tears of anger, of hurt, and most terribly of love. Because despite everything, I still loved her. I loved the woman she had been to me, and I hated her for who she had turned out to be. How can those two feelings coexist? How can you love and hate the same person with equal intensity? The storm inside me was more terrifying than the one outside. It threatened to destroy what little of me was left. The storm subsided, both outside the window and inside my soul. Morning came, gray and washed clean by the rain. I hadn't slept at all. I sat in my armchair, staring at nothing, exhausted and empty. The wall of rage and pain had cracked, and through it, a faint light began to shine. Understanding. I couldn't carry this alone anymore. I called my best friend David. He had known Sarah and me from the very beginning. An hour later, he was at my door with a thermos of hot coffee. I hadn't explained anything on the phone, but he must have heard it in my voice. I told him everything. The letter, the photo, the conversation with Emily. I spoke for a long time. My words jumbled, jumping from one thought to the next. David listened in silence, not interrupting, his expression serious and compassionate. When I finished, I expected anything: condemnation of Sarah, shock, advice. But he just said, "I'm so sorry, Alex. I can't imagine what you're going through." And then he asked a few simple questions that changed everything. "Alex, tell me honestly, was she a good wife to you?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Did she love you?" "I thought she did." I rasped. Double quotes. "No, not thought. You know the answer. Look at your 20 years together. Not at this secret, but at everything else." "Did she love you?" "Yes," I said, more firmly this time. "Yes, damn it, she did." I had felt it in her every touch, in her every look, in the way she cared for me. "Did she make you happy?" "More than," I admitted. Those 20 years had been the best years of my life. "Then," David said, choosing his words carefully, "maybe her secret wasn't a lie directed at you, but a tragedy she endured alone? People are complicated, Alex. We're full of contradictions. She wasn't just your wife. She was also a 17-year-old girl who had her child taken from her. And that girl lived inside her, always. Maybe she was silent not to deceive you, but to protect you. To protect you from this pain. And to protect the happy life you built together." His words were like a balm on an open wound. They didn't negate my pain, but they offered a different perspective. For the first time in 24 hours, I tried to see it all through her eyes. To imagine a young girl, terrified, alone, forced to give up her child. To imagine how that scar ached for her entire life. To imagine her fear. The fear that I, upon learning the truth, would turn away from her, see her as a fraud. Her love for me was so strong that she chose to carry that burden alone rather than risk losing it. Her silence wasn't a betrayal. It was her broken, desperate way of showing love. I began to re-examine our memories, but this time not with anger, but with compassion. Her annual sadness on May 15th, it wasn't withdrawal. It was a memorial. Her tears over the little box. It was a mother's grief. Her panicked refusal to adopt. It was loyalty to her firstborn. I realized that love and secrets can coexist. Her secret didn't cancel out her love for me. It was a tragic, inseparable part of her. She wasn't just the perfect wife from my fantasies. She was a real person with her own scars, fears, and a complicated past. And I had loved that real person. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive her for the lie. Forgiveness is too simple a word for a wound this complex, but I could try to understand. And in that understanding, perhaps I could find peace. It's been a week since I found the letter. I'm still sitting in the silence of our home, But it's a different kind of silence now. It's no longer empty. It's filled with the complex, bitter truth of the woman I loved. I'm holding her photograph, the one from the mantelpiece. I look at her smiling face, and now I see all of it. I see our love, our happiness, our 20 years. But I also see the deeply buried pain, the shadow of a long-ago tragedy that she carried with her until the very end. I loved her. There is no doubt about that. But now, the life I thought I knew in perfect detail feels like a lie. A beautiful, love-filled lie, but a lie nonetheless. Or maybe not a lie, but a story with missing pages. And now I've found those pages. I don't know what I'll do next. Will I try to find Leo? This young man, now 23, who carries a part of the woman I loved. I don't know if I have the right. It was her secret, her story. Perhaps my job is simply to keep it safe. I place the letter and the small photo of the infant back into the sandalwood box. This is part of her, too. Part of our story. Maybe some truths are too hard to face, but their existence doesn't erase. Love, it just makes it more complicated, deeper, infinitely more human. My Sarah wasn't perfect. She was a woman with a broken heart who desperately tried to build something whole. And she succeeded. She gave me 20 years of happiness. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Even if a part of that happiness was built on a secret, this story has left me with more questions than answers. And I would really value your perspective. What would you have done in my place? Is a secret like this forgivable? Share your thoughts in the comments below this video. Your stories and insights are what make this little corner of YouTube so special. Thank you for listening to the end. And of course, if you're not with us yet, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story.